Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When land surveyor Randall Keller bought 90 acres for peace and freedom, he didn't expect war. But when a rogue HOA tried to seize his land with forged deeds and fake laws, they triggered a battle they never saw coming and picked a fight with the wrong man. When I first bought the land near Lake Grapevine, I thought I was buying peace. 90 acres of open Texas earth, oak groves, tall grass, and an old stone well that looked like it had been dug before the Civil War. I'd worked as a licensed surveyor for over 20 years, so when the deal went through, I did what any self-respecting geodesist would do. I checked every line, every marker, every inch of that land myself. I verified the GPS coordinates, compared historical plat maps, even cross-referenced county archives. It was mine, legally, spatially, and morally. A private kingdom of dirt and sky, far from HOA nonsense, or so I thought. The first letter from Lake Breeze Hollow HOA arrived 3 weeks later, a glossy envelope with a gold crest and the sort of self-importance usually reserved for aristocrats or cult leaders. Dear resident, it began, as part of our commitment to maintaining community standards, we ask that you repaint your residence in an approved neutral color palette and refrain from outdoor noise after 9 p.m. I didn't know whether to laugh or frame it. My residence was a converted metal barn half a mile from the nearest road. No streetlights, no curbs, no HOA boundaries anywhere near me. I wrote back, politely but firmly. This property is privately owned, not part of your jurisdiction. Any further contact will be treated as harassment. Short, precise, like a shot across the bow. 2 weeks later, another letter came, then another. Then a fine, $500 for non-compliance with landscaping standards. That one made me choke on my coffee. Landscaping standards for prairie grass and mesquite trees. I sent a certified cease and desist, quoting the exact property coordinates and the original county registry entry from 1948 that clearly excluded my acreage from the HOA's development map. Still, the letters kept coming. Then, one morning, while I was calibrating a drone to map the North Ridge, I spotted a silver SUV parked just beyond my gate. A woman in a crisp white blouse and oversized sunglasses was taking pictures of my fence with the intensity of a crime scene investigator. I walked up, trying to keep my temper in check. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. "Are you Mr. Keller?" Her tone was rehearsed, sweetened by authority and disdain. "Depends who's asking." "Karen Stockwell," she said, handing me a business card embossed with the HOA logo. "President, Lake Breeze Hollow Homeowners Association." I resisted the urge to salute. "Ah, so you're the one sending me love letters." Her lips tightened. "Sir, your property lies within our visual perimeter and therefore must comply with our design and noise policies." "Visual perimeter," I repeated, amused. "That's not a legal term. That's something a cult invents to justify tithes." She frowned. "Our attorney." "Your attorney can read the same county boundary maps I did. My land isn't yours." I pointed to the barbed fence line. "Everything beyond that post, private, not yours, not Lake Breeze's, mine." She gave me the kind of smile people reserve for children and lunatics. "We'll see about that," she said, and drove off in a puff of self-righteous dust. By that evening, I had a new letter. This one was labeled Notice of Intent to Enforce. It accused me of non-compliance, verbal hostility, and aesthetic disruption. The phrase aesthetic disruption almost made me spit out my beer. I sent everything, every letter, every photo to my attorney, a sharp ex-Marine named Carla McIntyre. She laughed so hard she nearly cried. "Oh, she picked the wrong guy," Carla said. "You're literally a professional land surveyor." "And apparently a public enemy," I replied. "They've fined me more than $4,000 in total, on paper." Carla filed the complaint within 48 hours. Harassment, unlawful jurisdictional claims, and attempted fraud. The case hit county court in Denton, and the judge didn't even blink. HOA overreach cases were practically a local tradition. Mr. Keller's property, the judge said, tapping her gavel, does not and never has fallen under the Lake Breeze Hollow Association. Cease all correspondence immediately or face sanctions. Then she turned to me with a faint smile. "And Mr. Keller, I suggest you keep that documentation safe. People like this rarely give up." She wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, I got the judgment, $4,000 in damages from the HOA and a restraining order preventing direct contact from its president. Victory, clean, sharp, and documented. For a moment, I thought it was over. I even started drafting plans for a new irrigation system near the southern slope, convinced that the universe had finally decided to let me be. Then, one evening in late spring, while reviewing some aerial footage, I noticed something odd in the far corner of my property. Fresh tire tracks, a rectangle of newly cleared dirt, and the unmistakable outline of a poured concrete foundation. I zoomed in and felt my stomach drop. Someone was building something on my land. And somehow, I already knew who. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the drone footage over and over, frame by frame, trying to convince myself it was a mistake, a glitch, maybe some kids clearing space for a bonfire or a neighbor storing construction materials near the edge. But the more I looked, the more it became obvious. This wasn't random. It was methodical, gridded, deliberate. I loaded up my truck the next morning and drove out to the southwestern corner. That section of the property was thick with cedar and rarely visited. I kept it wild on purpose. Natural buffer zone. But now there was a bulldozed path cutting through it like a scar. Fresh gravel, wooden stakes, a concrete slab already cured and squared. A foundation. Someone had broken ground on a house, on my goddamn land. At first, I thought it might be a boundary error. Maybe one of the Lake Breeze residents thought their lot extended a little too far. Hell, even with GPS and satellite overlays, human stupidity was infinite. But as I stood there, chewing on a stalk of grass and staring at the rebar poking out of the slab, I noticed something else. There was a small laminated sign on the corner post. Future home of Lake Breeze Hollow's Clubhouse Annex. Private property. Members only. I blinked. My hands tightened into fists. By week's end, the framing was up. 2 stories. Fiber cement siding. Vinyl windows. A deck facing the lake. It was a McMansion embryo, the kind of copy-paste monstrosity Lake Breeze specialized in. And the worst part, nobody even tried to hide it. They were building on my land like they owned it. No notice, no letter, no shame. Then came the next letter, delivered in person by a smug teenage courier in a Lake Breeze polo. It read, "Dear neighbor, as you are now located adjacent to the community clubhouse, you are hereby considered an affiliate member of Lake Breeze Hollow HOA. Please provide gate keys to our office and register your property with the treasurer by Friday." I read it 3 times before laughing out loud. Affiliate member? Register my property? They'd built a goddamn house on my land, claimed it as theirs, and now expected me to hand them the keys like a good little serf. I didn't respond. I got in the truck and drove straight back to the site, this time with a tripod, survey scanner, and a copy of my original property deed tucked under my arm like a loaded weapon. I spent the next 2 hours in full documentation mode. GPS fix points, LiDAR scans, cross-checks with topographical overlays. Every measurement confirmed what I already knew. The house, no, the goddamn clubhouse, was sitting 17 feet inside my property line, a full 8/10 acres illegally occupied. I tried to stay calm. I really did. I called the HOA office and asked politely to speak to Karen. The receptionist said she was unavailable due to leadership responsibilities. I said, "You tell her Randall Keller called and he's giving her 24 hours to stop the build, or I'll file a criminal complaint." That got me a call back in under an hour. Karen's voice was all honey and condescension. "Mr. Keller, I understand you're upset, but there's clearly been a mix-up. That portion of land was deeded to the HOA years ago by the previous owner. We have a signed document on file." My blood ran cold. "No, you don't," I said flatly. "Oh, but we do," she insisted. "A gift deed from the prior landholder, dated and notarized. You must have overlooked it when you bought the property." "I'm a licensed goddamn surveyor, Karen. I didn't overlook anything." There was a pause. Then she hit me with her favorite line. "Well, Randall, maybe it's time you spoke to our legal team." Click. I didn't waste another second. That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office and pulled every deed, plat, and record on my parcel. Nothing in the public registry showed any subdivision or gifting of that southwestern corner. The land had transferred cleanly to me from the bank after the previous owner's foreclosure. No easements, no encroachments, and absolutely no record of donation. But when I asked about the gift deed she claimed, the clerk frowned. "Oh, we actually just received a filing on that 2 weeks ago. From the Lake Breeze Association." He handed me a copy. One page printed on cheap inkjet paper signed by Gary T. Patterson, supposedly the prior owner, and notarized by someone named Tina Levens. No stamp, no license number, no official registration seal, a forged document, a homemade fantasy. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but rage. They weren't just squatting. They were counterfeiting their way into ownership. I took the file, thanked the clerk, and walked out with fire in my spine. By the end of the week, I had hired a forensic document examiner, a second surveyor to double confirm boundary violations, and had Carla, my lawyer, prep a filing for land theft, document fraud, and trespassing. I even had my drone guy line up for flyover footage of the illegal construction. They thought I was some hayseed recluse too dumb to check a map. They were about to find out what happens when you steal from a man who makes maps for a living. The first thing I did Monday morning was call Carla. I gave her the rundown, the house, the bogus gift deed, the magical notarization from a phantom named Tina Levens. Carla didn't even try to sugarcoat it. "This is felony-level fraud," she said. "We're skipping letters. We go straight to court." While she got the ball rolling on the filing, I scheduled a site inspection with 2 independent land surveyors, not colleagues, outsiders. One came from Fort Worth, the other from Weatherford. I wanted neutrality, no ties, no questions. They both returned to the same conclusion. The construction was built 17 feet into my land, confirming the boundary dispute beyond any doubt. They even included a bonus in their report, a 3-dimensional rendering overlaying the house footprint on the county's GIS plot. It looked like someone had parked a stolen car across a property line and tried to paint their name on it in glitter. Meanwhile, I had my forensic document expert review the gift deed. He examined the ink composition, paperweight, and metadata from the scanned version the HOA had submitted to the county. What he found was glorious. The notarized document had been created on a home computer using Microsoft Word. The notary seal, a low-res image copy-pasted from a public notary website, sloppily resized and lacking a serial number. The signature, traced. The date, off by 6 years from the supposed notary's license period. And the cherry on top, no record of Tina Levens ever being licensed as a notary in the state of Texas. I checked twice. We compiled all of it, survey data, expert analysis, drone footage, and the suspiciously enthusiastic Airbnb listing that had already popped up for Lakeview Executive Retreat, a premier HOA-owned guest property. Karen had listed it herself, with a glowing description about exclusive lake access and prime community placement. I took screenshots of everything. Guest reviews. Pricing. The listing claimed a 5-star rating, even though it had been active for only 10 days. It was so brazen it almost felt surreal. I've met con artists, but Karen wasn't just committing fraud. She was live streaming it in high definition and charging nightly rates. We filed in Denton County District Court by Wednesday. 1 count of illegal construction, 1 count of land theft, 2 counts of document forgery, and a request for an emergency injunction to halt all activity on the structure. The judge reviewed the documentation the same day and signed off immediately. Construction stopped. Power to the house was shut off. Lockout posted. HOA fined $10,000 for non-compliance with county development notice requirements. But here's where things got entertaining. The HOA held a community meeting to address what they called a hostile land dispute fueled by outsider aggression. I showed up uninvited, sat in the back in a camo ball cap, and listened as Karen spun a tale worthy of Hollywood. According to her, I was a disgruntled landowner with a vendetta against Lake Breeze, jealous of their community unity, and trying to sabotage their clubhouse expansion because I didn't want to share the lakefront view. Then, in the middle of her PowerPoint presentation, yes, she brought a fucking PowerPoint. I stood up, walked to the front, and slid a folder across the table to the HOA treasurer. "Here's a certified survey," I said calmly. "Also included a forensic breakdown of your forged deed, notarization fraud analysis, county boundary overlays, and copies of Airbnb bookings made illegally from my land." The room went dead silent. Karen tried to play it cool. "Mr. Keller, this isn't the proper form." "No," I interrupted. "The proper form is county court, which is why you've been served." Carla's assistant walked in right on cue and handed Karen a thick envelope. "See you on Monday." I left the room to stunned murmurs, a few raised eyebrows, and one guy in the front row who actually clapped. I didn't need their support. I just needed them to realize who they were standing behind. The next morning, the local paper picked up the story. Headline: Surveyor sues HOA for building clubhouse on his private land. Within hours, my inbox filled with emails, some angry, some sympathetic, all curious. And to my surprise, a few were from other property owners at the edge of Lake Breeze. They wanted to know how I'd proven the HOA wrong. One even sent me a PDF of his own property deed, asking if I'd take a look because they're starting to pressure me too. This was bigger than me now. Karen hadn't just stepped over a line. She bulldozed it, forged a deed, threw up a building, and started collecting rent. But I wasn't just coming for her anymore. I was coming for the entire damn scheme. 8 days. That's how long Karen had to vacate the premises before the court-authorized demolition. The countdown wasn't mine. It was the judge's order, signed and sealed after reviewing every piece of evidence: illegal structure, forged documents, unauthorized business activity, boundary violations. It was airtight. But Karen, being Karen, did what delusional petty tyrants always do. She doubled down. Day 1, the county posted the demolition notice on the structure's front door in bright orange vinyl letters. Condemned, unauthorized structure, subject to removal by order of court. Within 12 hours, the sign was gone, ripped down, and in its place was a hand-painted HOA banner reading, "This property is protected by community rights." Day 2, she had her contractors back on site, this time working in silence and mostly at night. I had my drone up every morning at dawn. They weren't building anymore, but they were reinforcing. Heavy-duty locks, security cameras, motion lights. Someone had even welded a latch to the inside of the front door. She was turning the place into a bunker. On day 4, I drove out to check the site myself. My truck barely made it through the growing line of SUVs and Teslas parked on the gravel. Karen had organized a block-wide community preservation sit-in. I kid you not, folding chairs, lawn signs, acoustic guitars. A woman with a ukulele was singing something about freedom from tyranny. It looked like a Whole Foods protest stumbled into a meth bust. I stood on my side of the boundary line, which I'd now marked with bright orange steel stakes and legal notices every 10 feet. "You're trespassing," I said to Karen, loud enough for the acoustic set to falter. She emerged from the house like a queen descending the steps of Versailles. "Mr. Keller," she called out, fake politeness dialed to 11. "We're exercising peaceful assembly under the First Amendment. You can't evict free citizens." I took out my phone and started recording. "This isn't an eviction," I said. "This is court-ordered demolition of a fraudulent structure built on stolen land." That night, my drone captured footage of Karen standing on the roof of the structure, wrapped in an American flag, screaming into her phone. I forwarded the clip to Carla. "I don't even have the words," she replied. By day 6, she'd gone full reality show. She invited a local Fox affiliate to document the injustice, standing in front of the illegally built house and tearfully proclaiming herself a victim of land barons, corruption, and male aggression against female leadership. The clip aired twice. That night, framed as a developing dispute over HOA expansion, I knew what she was doing, playing to public sympathy, reframing criminal trespass and document fraud as a civil rights cause. It was deranged, but also effective. Her TikTok campaign was exploding. The hashtag #Czar Justice for Karen was trending in Denton County. A few thousand people, most of whom had never owned land or read a zoning permit in their lives, were flooding her comments with hearts and solidarity. So I did what I always do. I stayed quiet, gathered data, and waited. On day 8, at precisely 9 a.m., I arrived at the site with a convoy, sheriff's deputies, my attorney, a demolition contractor, and a camera crew I hired to document every inch. This wasn't about optics. It was about liability. I wanted a full visual record in case Karen decided to sue for emotional distress once her fantasy fortress turned to rubble. She was still inside when we got there, locked in, chained from the inside, blasting classical music out the windows and live streaming herself sobbing into the camera. "They're here," she whispered dramatically. "The bulldozers, the enemy. This is how freedom dies." A deputy knocked. No answer. He knocked again, this time louder. Finally, Sheriff Ellis stepped forward. "Karen," he shouted, "you've got 15 minutes to exit voluntarily. You are in violation of a court order. If you don't come out, we will enter by force." 15 minutes passed. Nothing. 10 more. Still nothing. Then came the breach. One of the deputies used bolt cutters to sever the chain on the back door. Another pushed inside, body cam rolling. Karen screamed like a banshee and tried to barricade herself in a bathroom, live stream still running, but the law doesn't pause for bad theater. Within 5 minutes, she was escorted out, flanked by deputies, mascara running, wrapped in a throw blanket like she'd just survived a hurricane. The crew got to work immediately. Excavator, wrecking ball, dust, and debris. The drone captured everything. Roof collapsing, walls snapping, support beams giving way. What was once her clubhouse was reduced to a splintered heap in under 2 hours. No ceremony, no delay, just the sound of consequences. Karen sat on a lawn chair across the street, surrounded by a few loyal diehards still humming protest songs. Her TikTok was still live. Her viewers watched as her empire crumbled in real time. By sunset, the only thing left standing on that corner of my land was a laminated sign I installed that read, "Private property. Trespassers will be sued." Court-enforced boundary underneath it, in smaller text. Drone surveillance. In use. I stood there as the last truck rolled away, arms crossed, boots planted in my soil, and thought, that's the sound of fiction meeting fact. 2 days after the demolition, my inbox looked like a war zone. News alerts, interview requests, angry emails from HOA loyalists accusing me of destroying a beloved community space. One message read, "Hope you're happy living next to rubble, tyrant." Another warned, "You'll regret this once the truth comes out." I chuckled. The truth. I was practically married to the truth. Slept next to it at night, ate breakfast with it, took it fishing on weekends. But then came a much more interesting email. Subject line, "Found something you should see." No name, no signature, just a PDF attachment labeled Lake Breeze Financials Internal Use Only. I scanned it for viruses, found none, and opened it. The first page was mundane. Standard HOA budget entries, common area maintenance, community events, security cameras. But then things got strange. Over $30,000 allocated for landscaping project Phase 2 for an area that didn't exist on any map. $10,000 labeled as consulting fees, T. Levins. That name stopped me cold. Tina Levins, the ghost notary from Karen's fake gift deed. Carla and I reviewed the file line by line, then compared it to public financial disclosures the HOA had filed with the state. The numbers didn't match. Funds were being siphoned from the HOA's communal account to what looked like 2 or 3 different shell entities. One of them registered to a P.O. box in Arlington under the name Karen T. Stockwell, trustee. It was textbook embezzlement, money laundered through fake vendors, padded invoices, and projects that never happened. Carla filed for a subpoena to get the HOA's full financial records. Once granted, things snowballed fast. By the end of the week, we had bank statements, vendor contracts, and payment ledgers. It was all there. Karen had funneled over $120,000 from HOA dues into her personal accounts. Some were disguised as reimbursements, others as retreat costs and legal fees. She even listed the down payment on the illegal house as a temporary clubhouse infrastructure lease. Better yet, it turned out she had listed the property on Airbnb, not as HOA housing, but as a private vacation home under her own name. I found the listing re-uploaded after demolition with a note, "Under renovation, check back soon." There were even early bookings scheduled for the fall. Guests had left glowing reviews. "Beautiful spot, great view of the lake, very private. We'll book again." One guest had even uploaded a picture from the deck built on my land. That was the final nail. We handed everything over to the district attorney's office. Karen was arrested 3 days later in what the media dubbed the HOA Queenpin scandal. She didn't go quietly. She'd scheduled an interview that morning with a local influencer to clear her name. The arrest happened mid-shoot, cameras rolling, microphone on. 1 minute she was mid-rant about entitled landowners and male-dominated justice, and the next she was face down on the hood of a deputy's cruiser. The video went viral by lunch. The charges were serious: fraud, forgery, wire fraud, unlawful business operation, and criminal trespass. But it didn't stop there. The investigation revealed she hadn't acted alone. 2 board members were implicated in falsifying financial reports. A third had signed off on the forged deed as a witness. One had even booked the fake clubhouse on Airbnb for a wellness retreat and expensed it back to the HOA. It was corruption layered like an onion, rotten from every angle. HOA residents were furious. Half of them hadn't even known the clubhouse was illegal. The other half had suspected something fishy but kept quiet. Now, they were holding emergency meetings, some demanding resignations, others threatening lawsuits. A few brave souls reached out to me privately, apologizing. One old-timer named Bill dropped off a pie at my gate with a note. Didn't vote for her. Thanks for doing what we couldn't. By the end of the month, Lake Breeze Hollow HOA was under full forensic audit. The county threatened to strip its nonprofit status. Residents were pulling out left and right, refusing to pay dues. Lawsuits flew in every direction. Karen, the board, even the contractors who'd helped with the build. It was beautiful chaos. And through it all, I kept my mouth shut. No interviews, no social media. I let the evidence speak for itself. But I did install another sign just below the first one. This one read, "Property restored, fraud removed, justice in progress." I thought the hard part was over, that after the demolition, the arrest, and the financial expose, things would finally settle. I'd go back to flying my drone over the oaks, plotting irrigation lines, maybe building that little observation shed I'd been planning since March. But no, Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Within 72 hours of posting bail, she was back online. TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Hell, even Nextdoor. A full-blown media blitz. Her opening salvo? A grainy melodramatic video of her standing in front of the flattened remains of the illegal structure wrapped in a scarf, with a tremble in her voice that deserved an Oscar. "They came in the night," she whispered, pausing for effect. "Bulldozers and men in black, destroying a safe space for women-led governance and eco-conscious retreat." She called it the erasure of female authority. The video hit 500,000 views in 2 days. She followed up with a multi-part TikTok series titled "One Woman versus the Land Barons." In it, I was the villain, a bitter, childless land monopolist who couldn't stand a strong woman building community. Her edits were wild, black and white filters, ominous music, even slow-motion footage of her being led out of the house in cuffs, spliced with MLK speeches. I almost admired the effort. Almost. My phone started ringing again. Reporters, HOA members, strangers. My nephew called to ask why some guy on Twitter was calling me the Texas Putin of property rights. Then came the merch, t-shirts, mugs, Justice for Karen bumper stickers, a GoFundMe titled "Help Karen Rebuild Her Dream Clubhouse" that raised over $15,000 in 3 days, mostly from yoga instructors and wine moms who thought they were funding a First Amendment cause. One donor even wrote, "Fight the system, HOA pride forever." I wasn't sure if it was satire or brain damage. I watched in silence as the public opinion pendulum started to wobble. Local news, desperate for clicks, began reporting on the growing controversy with their usual both sides spin. One anchor described it as a murky land rights debate with potential gender dynamics at play. That's when Carla called. "She's baiting you," she said flatly. "She wants you to snap, to go public, to lose control of the narrative." "Then let her flail," I replied. I've got something better than a TikTok series, because what Karen didn't know was that while she was busy filming slow-mo montages of rubble and betrayal, the DA's office had quietly reopened her bail review hearing. One of her live streams, filmed inside the condemned house after the court had ordered her off the property, was submitted as evidence of violating the terms of her release. In the video, she gleefully narrated her final moments inside what she called the sanctuary. She even bragged about slipping past the pigs and getting one last look before the storm. The court didn't find it poetic. They found it criminal. The judge revoked her bail. The next week, she was arrested again, this time without the makeup and monologues. No cameras, no supporters, just a short ride back to county jail in the back of a Crown Vic. The internet turned on her faster than a power grid in a thunderstorm. Videos got flagged. TikTok suspended her for coordinated misinformation. GoFundMe froze her account after the DA's office issued a statement clarifying that Karen had no lawful property interest in the demolished structure. Even the wine moms started backing away, claiming they were misled. And then, the death blow. A local civil liberties attorney published a 10-minute video breakdown titled, "No, this isn't a civil rights case. It's just fraud." He went through the court documents, maps, GPS data, and video clips. His tone was dry, surgical. By the end of it, even Karen's most loyal fans had stopped posting. I never said a word, never uploaded a single video, never gave a quote. And yet, somehow, my silence said more than anything Karen ever streamed. The courtroom was packed. Not with media, not anymore. That circus had moved on once the TikTok flames died out and the bail was yanked from under Karen's feet. No, this crowd was different. It was quiet, watchful, neighbors, HOA members, a few county officials, and more than a few people who had once proudly carried Justice for Karen tote bags and now looked like they'd prefer to be anywhere else. I sat at the plaintiff's table, pressed and still, hands folded, a thick binder of documents to my left and Carla to my right. She looked like she was preparing for combat. Karen, meanwhile, looked like a ghost of her former self. No scarves, no makeup, no patriotic shawl, just a beige prison jumpsuit, shackled at the ankles, her expression somewhere between defiance and panic. This wasn't the criminal trial. That would come later. This was my civil case, the lawsuit against Karen and the Lake Breeze Hollow HOA for land theft, illegal construction, and damages. I wasn't here for vengeance. I was here for a clean title, legal recognition, and the principle of the thing. I didn't bulldoze a fantasy out of spite. I was correcting a lie written in concrete. The opening statements were predictable. Karen's public defender did his best to paint her as misguided but well-intentioned, a woman who genuinely believed the land had been deeded to the HOA. He tried to lean on confusion, procedural complexity, and a history of informal agreements. It was like watching someone build a defense out of cotton candy and prayer. Then Carla stood up. She was surgical, brutal. She laid out every forged document, every payment trail, every fake invoice, and every GPS coordinate down to the last decimal. She entered into evidence the original deed, the county plat maps, the forensic report on the notarized gift deed, and the financials showing Airbnb income wired to Karen's personal account. She even played one of Karen's own TikTok videos, just 30 seconds of her ranting about claiming space and manifesting ownership. The jury didn't even blink. They'd seen enough online lunacy to spot the real thing. Mid-trial, we called in two witnesses, the second land surveyor and the forensic document expert. The surveyor walked the court through how the house had been built nearly a full acre inside my boundary line, explaining the markers and topographic contours in plain English. The document expert followed, describing in detail how the notary stamp on Karen's gift deed had been copy-pasted from a Google image search, resized badly, and inserted into a Word doc with no metadata. The jurors winced. Even the judge looked like she was trying not to laugh. Then we presented the Airbnb data, complete with booking logs, payment receipts, and user reviews that referenced my home, or host Karen was amazing. It was like watching a Jenga tower collapse in slow motion. Karen didn't testify. Her attorney probably knew better. The moment she opened her mouth, it would turn into another episode of the HOA Martyr Diaries, and the judge was already 2 sighs away from contempt. The jury took less than 4 hours. Verdict: in my favor. Full damages awarded. HOA found liable for enabling fraudulent use of land and misappropriation of funds. Karen personally responsible for $180,000 in restitution, plus legal fees. The judge's final statement was short, but it rang like a bell. This court affirms that private property rights are not subject to coercion, fictional deeds, or HOA fantasy jurisdictions. Judgment for the plaintiff. It was done. I shook Carla's hand outside the courthouse. "You were vicious," I said. She smirked. "You pay me to be." Karen was led out the back under supervision, shackled again. No supporters, no live stream, no farewell speech. Just the sound of camera shutters from the press who'd shown up late, hoping to catch the final nail. A few days later, I received the official title confirmation and court-ordered boundary verification. My land was clean again. Untouched. Uncontested. The house was gone. The lawsuits were settled. The ink was dry. But there was one last thing I needed to do. At the corner of the old construction site where the HOA had once flown its little flag, I installed a steel monument about waist-high. Brushed metal, concrete base, laser-etched lettering. Private land. Trespassers will be sued in memory of those who thought paper could beat property. It wasn't petty. It was honest. Like a survey marker, permanent and undeniable. I waited exactly 1 week after the final court ruling before breaking ground on the new fence. Not the cheap split-rail type HOA developments love to install so they can claim they're rustic. No, this was steel-reinforced, powder-coated black, 7 feet high, with razor-straight lines and concrete footings deeper than most HOA board meetings. I installed a camera on every corner and a solar-powered motion sensor at the old trail where the so-called clubhouse used to stand. I didn't need security. I needed punctuation. For nearly a year, my land had been treated like a suggestion, a blank page for HOA fantasy building, fake paperwork, and neighborhood imperialism. The fence was my period at the end of a long, stupid sentence. Neighbors came by, some cautious, others curious. A few tried to strike up conversation, test the waters. One guy, Frank from 3 lots over, brought me a 6-pack and a handshake. Didn't vote for her, he said, like it was a confession. Thought it was just an overzealous landscaping initiative. I nodded and cracked open a beer with him. We drank in silence for a while, watching the final post get sunk into place. The HOA, what was left of it, officially dissolved 2 months later. After Karen's conviction, 3 board members stepped down, and the remaining ones realized the legal exposure wasn't worth the $20 monthly dues. They voted to shut down operations, return residual funds to residents, and remove the Lake Breeze Hollow signs from the neighborhood entrances. The place reverted to an unincorporated subdivision. Homeowners were on their own now. A few panicked. Most shrugged. Without Karen, there was no real glue holding it together, just rules written by bored people desperate to control something. As for Karen, she took a plea deal. 10 years for fraud, forgery, and unlawful use of private land, with eligibility for parole in 7. Her lawyer tried to push for a lighter sentence, citing community leadership history and online harassment trauma. The judge, to her credit, simply pointed at the drone footage of the illegal build and said, "You don't get to cry fraud when you built the fraud yourself." Last I heard, Karen had taken a job in the prison library. She's probably cataloging books about land law, or how not to get caught selling short-term rentals on stolen property. A few journalists tried to bait me into giving a follow-up interview. Do you think this sends a message about property rights in America? One asked, "Would you call yourself a defender of liberty?" I told them no. I'm not a liberty symbol. I'm a land surveyor. My job is to draw lines. Real ones, not ones made up in Word documents. The sun came out strong the morning I installed the final sign. Not the warning sign, though those were still there. This one was different. I had it laser cut from steel and mounted on a block of limestone I pulled from the lake bed. It sat near the edge of the southern border, right where the HOA tried to expand their little kingdom. It read, "Private land. Trespassers will be sued." In memory of those who thought they could fake their way into ownership. I planted a flag next to it. Not the American flag or Texas, just a plain white one. Surrender, permanently raised, only not by me. By those who thought law was optional and lines were imaginary.